You have one new message.
This may be the last message that you ever hear from your friend Tyler. If I ever pass away, I expect you to listen to it every single day. Okay, bud? All right, well, see you.
The best is I definitely.
Oh man!
I mean, that's our entire life, and it will be our entire life forever. And I probably will say that.
Yeah. Hey kids, welcome back to your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad, the podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. I'm your host, Tyler Bentz, and this is your other host,
Woody Brown.
Hey, pal.
Hey, man.
How we doing?
I mean, I'm just in a good mood. I mean, it's a strange thing to say that I'm in a good mood after listening to that message, because that message implies, or at least reminds me, that at some point, since we're all mortal, and we're doing it in terms of who's healthiest, I mean, more than likely, I will be on this earth, and you will have already journeyed to the next adventure, and I'll just be listening to that voicemail every single day. I mean, I already started doing it. Is that weird?
No, I think you should definitely get in the swing of it.
The best is, like, you used to do that kind of stuff
every day,
like all the time,
multiple times a day.
One of my favorite memories is thinking about when you would call up Sam Goody, where our drummer Thomas worked. And I know we've talked about this before on the show, but you would call it up and pretend to be, working for the record company, asking about the total number of sales for just like some random album. I think Radiohead. I don't even remember what the.
No, I remember asking for Power Band 5000 specifically.
Oh gosh, that's incredible.
Now this is what it's like when worlds collide.
Yeah, I used to really have a lot of good uses for my voice talents, and I mean, this is awful, and it's definitely not something that I want kids to do, because it is kind of crappy. But when I was a teenager, my friend Robbie and I would do this thing when we would get off out of school. We would do this thing where we would look through the phone book, and we would find like old people names. This is terrible already. I'm admitting it. And we would call this person. And so he would be on the phone upstairs. I would be down here. I would do this radio voice saying, "Hey, we're from radio station, blah, blah, blah."
You got to give us a taste, man.
Good times, great oldies, Fox 97.
Yes.
I'm not going to do the taste. You already heard the taste up top.
That's a voice. You're talking, when you say radio voice, you're going to be more like, "Hey, how you doing?
Boomer and the news."
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
That kind of thing. And so I would do that, and then I would be like, "You've won this contest. You're getting 7,700 Twinkies coming to your house next week." And then I'd be like, I would pretend that I was on the air, and then I was going to pass her off to Robbie, which kind of added and made it
realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And they would just be, oh man, we'd be like, "All right, we're gonna need you to say, 'I love America.'" And then you'd have these like 80-year-old women being like, "I love America."
Oh no, dude.
Oh yeah.
Here's the thing: you can't feel. I mean, yes, that is definitely awful, but it's also a generational thing. Like, our kids aren't prank calling people. Like, do you remember? I remember when it was a big deal when my folks got like caller ID.
Oh yeah.
At the very beginning of it, it was like a separate box that you had to purchase, and then the phone number would pop up in there. And now it's like every phone call's got caller ID.
And not only that, but like I would assume that, I mean, now it even tells you if it's like a spam, possibly like a spam call. So like, yeah, I don't really think that exists anymore.
What's that? Like prank calling and stuff?
Just like prank calling.
I mean,
people, yeah.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure that sort of, I guess, target age is still, you and I have talked about this before too. There's a couple of these YouTube channels where it's like these guys who are basically hacker level computer savvy, who instead of hacking like the innocent, they actually go after these people that are doing these either phone scams or computer scams. The quote unquote bad guys are targeting like, elderly folks that can easily fall for it. And it's really sad, man. I mean, sometimes they'll just dump like hundreds of thousands of dollars. They'll just lose. And these call centers are basically just calling the states and just tricking older people into losing a bunch of money. Well, it's awesome because the sort of heroic guys in this film this interaction. They pretend like they're old, and they just, just trash these dudes. And then also on one of them that I've been watching, or I had watched, they also have successfully, they were able to hack into the webcams of this call center and watched it get raided by the police, which is incredible.
It's amazing. Yeah. I watched one. It's funny because like you and I was into it, way before.
Here we go.
Like with most things. But you got into it recently, and I kind of jumped back in. So now my algorithm is like just tons of this. And the funny thing is like I saw one the other day that same kind of thing. I mean, the guy. So what's the guy's name? Like
I don't know, man. There's a bunch of them.
Well, there's like this main guy that sort of he sort of pioneered that like old lady voice changer kind of thing. And they're just amazing videos. And there was another guy that I saw that was doing, kind of doing the same thing. And he had this scammer on the phone for 10 hours.
Oh, man, I love it.
And then finally just like dropped. So the whole like 10 hours was like, they'll stay on. I mean, it's like super shady. Like they'll stay on the phone while the person goes
to the bank.
Or like to Target or Walmart to get this like prepaid card. And like, again, 10 hours of this. And then at the very end, like he has this card, or the, quote, old lady has the card, and he like just like puts it back into his account, and the person is just like, the scammer is just losing their mind. It's awesome.
And like sometimes with a lot of these things, I'm always like, how can somebody fall for this stuff? But it is really convincing. So anyway, we're going to be talking about a lot of random stuff today because it's one of those days and one of those weeks where a lot of different things happened in our personal lives. Each of us have just been like slammed with work, with family stuff. And so we kind of wanted to come on and talk about a bunch of different things that we just haven't had a chance to yet. But before we do that, man, I kind of want to tell you a little bit about a spooky experience that I had this past week. Coming off of the heels of your story last week when you told us about, the potential home invader, as I was listening to that story, I was like, okay, is this about to get paranormal? Is this a supernatural thing? Or is it a scary story about the potential fact that there was a strange person in your house? Now, amazingly enough, like this is part of the reason why I love it when people jump over to our Instagram while they're listening to the show or shortly thereafter and kind of give us their opinions and take on it and everything. Because, and if you're interested in doing that, you can find us at, our username is That Would Be Rad. It's fun because you can hear, everyone agrees, number one, get those batteries replaced. Tyler.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And another thing that someone pointed out was like that whenever I said, well, I hope you got those batteries done because you went to Target that night. And you're like, yeah, I did the next day. I'm like, huh? Like, I totally missed it when we were talking about it. But someone else was like, boy, a day later, huh? And that, folks, sums up Tyler in just generally probably got distracted. And
100%.
There's like, oh, man, there's a Rice Krispie. There's a Fruity Pebbles Rice Krispie treat. Okay. Well, let me tell you. So when we talk about these things, sometimes I just end up being on, I don't want to say high alert necessarily, but I'm sort of just on the lookout with some of those things in mind.
Okay.
So let me tell you about this. So
after these messages, we'll be right back.
It's a pretty cool place if you're a Martian.
Or a vampire. You think you really know what's happening around here, don't you? fighters for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show. It's early in the morning. It's still dark out. My son and I are doing our sort of early morning walk or run. In this case, we were actually just walking and talking. It's a good time for... No, it was 6 o'clock. It's a good time for us to just kind of catch up. Somehow, this is, in general, the time where he remembers, oh man, I forgot to do XYZ assignment. Oh, okay, when's it due, son? Today,
yeah.
Okay. And we just talk about life and all that. Well, he was telling me about something, and the strange thing about that morning is it was extra sort of smoky outside. Now, again, it's dark outside, but my headlamp's pretty powerful. We could tell that there was some smoke, and honestly, we could smell it too. In fact, like at first, man, I thought, oh my gosh, is there somebody's like house on fire? And so we were kind of hustling through the neighborhood to try to see, because it seemed to be getting stronger the further down the road that we went. We kind of get toward the back of the neighborhood, and we're just like, well, I don't know. I don't see anything, you know. I turned off my headlamp so that I could maybe see, you know, maybe the glow of a fire or you know, something. I was kind of looking at people's chimneys. You know, it was cold enough to, it's that weird time in Georgia right now where one day it'll be 79 degrees and the next it'll be 31.
Oh, not even that, dude. At night, it'll get down to 34, and then by...
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
31's colder.
Day. Or 31.
Yeah.
And then by noon the next day, like yesterday, it was like 77 degrees.
Yeah, no, it's just bizarre, man. And so I thought, well, maybe somebody just kind of kicked on, you know, started a fire or something in their fireplace this morning, and maybe that's what we're smelling. But it was just so much, though, that we thought, nah, this seems like a fire. Well, as we you know, have to kind of turn around and come back home so he can get home in time to get ready for school and take a shower and all that. Mm-hmm. Off to my left, we kind of make this curve in the road, and off to my left, I wouldn't say deep in the woods, but far enough in the woods that this would seem to be sort of strategic. I see this weird orange sort of flickering. Mm-hmm. Now, at this point, I forgot to charge my headlamp. And
well.
Hold on. And so it was dim enough to, like, I couldn't make it out. But what it looked like were the embers of a small campfire. Now, this is in an area where there's no houses, sort of relatively close by, to where I would think, oh, well, maybe somebody was just burning some brush. Right. Side note, we've actually been on it wasn't a burn ban, but there were some, you know, drier conditions over the last, 4 or 5 days, mm-hmm. to where it was advised not to burn in your yard or whatever. So I'm thinking, okay, the neighbors that live relatively close to here wouldn't have done it. And then number two, why would it still be simmering so early in the morning? So the first thought that I have is...
Well, real quick, and you're saying that this is kind of like off in the woods?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so not close enough to the road to where I can, like, jump in there real quick and test it out, or not close enough to where my headlamp would be strong enough because it was dimmer because I forgot to charge it, mm-hmm. to where I could determine what was going on. In fact, it was so dim that I could kind of see that little orange flicker, but I couldn't tell, was there somebody laying next to it or not? So I say, son, let's hustle back home. And then it's, 100 question time. Well, Dad, whatever. Yeah. So we get into like a safe enough sort of distance. And by the way, I actually turned off my headlamp. So, I mean, this is how intense I get, man. Turn off the headlamp because I don't want them to know exactly where I'm at in the dark. Mm-hmm. Or if they turn on the light, I'll be able to see it.
Oh yeah, it's like when you cut off your inside light if you're looking out of a window.
Exactly. Yeah. Mid-afternoon. It's it's just, hey man, it's called being warrior strong. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So every now and then I'm kind of like, I tell my son, I'm like, okay, keep your ears open, just listen. Let's, and he's like, what do you think's going on? I was like, well, I mean, it's weird that somebody would have a fire there. So to me, there's only there's only like two options.
Aliens.
One, it is somebody that was, just burning something that shouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. I find that to be less likely. Or two, someone's camping out there. And so we think this is the source of the smoke. This is the source of the smell. And we just hightail it there. I get back home and I'm like, you know what? I'm a little spooked because if it is sort of like a vagrant or something like that, something, I want to know if that was embers because there's no good explanation for this. So I get my Jeep, I drive down there, I shine my freaking bright lights down there.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately, here's what I see. There's a small stream that's reflecting a street lamp that's up the hill about half a mile on the other side of the neighborhood, and that's what I was seeing the whole time. The reflection off of water.
I mean,
it was perfectly orange, and because it was like a little stream, that flickering of that reflection
was like
tricked my mind big time. I thought for sure it was like a little campfire, but it was just this small section where it perfectly reflected that orange freaking old school street lamp that's on the other side of my neighborhood.
Yeah. Dude, when you said you like pointed your Jeep lights down there, I immediately thought like, okay, there's going to be like a figure.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be running away.
Yeah. Or just like starts just running towards my Jeep full
towards
speed.
You, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I just run it over immediately. Full, like ramming speed.
And then bury them off in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
Every time. We talk about that. That's the method. Anyways, it's just funny because when you 2 weeks in a row, we talked about stuff that was pretty dang spooky,
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I'm out there in the middle of the quiet morning. There's this strange smoky smell. And then I see that, and it's like immediately my mind goes to, boom, it's a campfire. I mean, it seemed so real to me.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy. I mean, and plus being out in the woods at 6 when it's
just pitch black.
Pretty dark out, yeah, for sure, after this time change.
Yeah. And the funny thing about my neighborhood is the street lamps don't start until the back side of the neighborhood. So it's basically, if you didn't have a headlamp on, you'd be just the ambient light from folks' houses potentially would light the way a little, but it's just pitch black out there.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are in a good, like a bit more rural of an area for sure. So, I mean, it's kind of.
Here we go. Here comes the insult.
No, not an insult. It's I mean, it would be a pretty good area, I would say, if you were like a transient kind of passing through and just kind of camping out.
Yeah.
An update to our story, or my story.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it, man.
I mean, nothing too crazy, but my kids.
Oh, no.
We've been wanting to like explore behind the house. And when it's like during the summer and when it warms up, like, I don't know if you guys have, for all you folks that have never been to Georgia, I will say, like the woods, it grows up real quick. And it's kind of hard to like get through, especially like little kids. And there's like briars everywhere. And so we've been meaning to go back there and just sort of explore, because it's like it is pretty cool. There's like this, kind of drop off thing. And then like way back between our house and like the train tracks, it's kind of like marsh land. And so it's like the Army Corps of Engineers kind of protected area.
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. But yeah, we went back there and looked around, and I didn't see any kind of
like tracks or
no tracks, no like not even like game trails. We did see little raccoon prints, which is funny because they just look like little miniature hands, like human hands.
Yeah.
But yeah, no trash, like food,
Snickers
nothing.
wrappers.
So I don't know. Maybe exactly. Maybe the guy
really was hanging out with his uncle.
Yeah, he's just living with his uncle. It's just walking around. But yeah.
So another crazy thing that happened this week, man, and we posted about it on our Instagram, is the great, legendary Akira Toriyama, the creator for, I guess his most popular series I would say is Dragon Ball, passed away last week.
Yeah, and it's pretty sad. Like I was kind of adjacent to Dragon Ball. I would always see it. Kids. I remember I have several of like the little mangas from forever ago. Like, if you're in Cleveland, Georgia, back in the 90s, and you get your hands on like a Japanese, it was like one of the weirdest things I'd ever seen, because us in the West, like, I don't know, we just sort of think, I guess, that like everywhere is like us, and so reading from the opposite direction, it's all in Japanese. It was like, this is amazing. Yeah. Like, I'm sure I got ripped off in whatever trade I made for this thing, but and of course now I can't even find it. But yeah, he's definitely like a legend. He's definitely one of the faces on the Mount Rushmore of really anime and manga.
Yeah, I read this cool quote. It was like, and I forget where it was from, but I wrote it down, so I'm an idiot for not writing the source. But basically, they said that after filmmaker Miyazaki, Toriyama is likely the most influential Japanese artist of modern times. Pretty amazing.
Yeah,
he's got a ton of different series that he did. But if you're not familiar with Dragon Ball, basically it's this saga that follows this journey of a kind of a youthful spirited, I'll say, and a kind-hearted. It starts off when he's a boy, but this character named Goku, and he kind of figures out, this legend about these 7 mystical orbs. They're called Dragon Balls. And he finds out that when you bring them together, they wield this ability to summon this benevolent dragon that can grant you any one wish. And then after that happens, these Dragon Balls disperse across the planet, and then people are just hunting them down again to basically find all 7 again to then wish, over and over and over again. It draws apparently some loose inspiration from a Chinese epic called Journey to the West.
I was going to bring that up.
And what's interesting too is, sprinkled into this adventure and comedy, there's just so much humor involved. Some of it, especially if you go back and you read it, it's for kids our age that would have been the target audience back then, definitely inappropriate. I kind of colored in some nudity so my kids could read it. I made a little like a bikini with a Sharpie, but it's just this fun. It starts off, especially when Goku's young, he's just like this funny, like carefree, kind of weird because he grew up with his grandfather like in the woods, and so he doesn't really know about technology and stuff, and it's just hilarious, man. But what's interesting is because, and I've talked about this before too, but growing up overseas, I was like in the heart of it. I lived in Southeast Asia, and it's always strange to me that, admittedly, I didn't even get into manga until like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And then I just dove head first and just couldn't stop reading it.
You've read all of it now.
But my experience with it was, again, I'm in Southeast Asia, Jakarta, Indonesia. I went to an international school. And I remember some of my friends would be like, oh man, you got to check this out. And I'd be like, man, these drawings are incredible, but I can't read Japanese or Korean or whatever. They didn't have the English translations. And so by the time we moved back, now you're talking mid to late 90s, And really, I think you can kind of trace back, at least the people that I've talked to and stuff, they'll remember this the most, or they tend to remember this as sort of their source for what got them into anime in general, and that was...
You know their names. Now see the show that started it all. Earth's mightiest warriors, only smaller. Dragon Ball. Weekdays at 5:30.
Master Roshi, get off the toilet!
I said hold on!
You're stinky.
They're so cute at that age.
The Toonami Cartoon Network after-school program. And this was like, I think, in 1997. Now, again, around this time period, man, I was more interested in girls, Oasis, gotta graduate high school, and then, whatever. So I wasn't watching Cartoon Network at the time, really. But at the time, things like Voltron, Sailor Moon, Gundam Wing, all these things, over-the-top combat, that's what was hitting the airwaves and just causing a craze. And then in 98, right after its run in Japan, Cartoon Network added Dragon Ball Z. And so Dragon Ball Z, Goku's grown up, and
he's the...
Yeah. So it's just interesting, man, like, to have such an impact. I mean, one thing that I found when kind of just like seeing all these posts about him passing away is like his reach, dude. It goes beyond like where you grew up, what color your skin is. Like, it's a universal love for this guy. And it's one of those things, man, that always solidifies for me the importance of creativity, the importance of, listening to your inspiration and making something, no matter what it is, podcast, a clay sculpture, a painting, a drawing, a song, whatever it is, a story, whatever it is, it's important because, number one, not everyone can do it necessarily, or they don't tap into it, I should say.
Yeah.
And so if you have even just an ounce, a thimbleful of that type of talent, or even just the drive to do it, you got to do it, man, because, he could have made different decisions in his life and we would never have this, his legacy would be something different. And so it's really interesting, and it's sad that he passed away relatively young too. I mean, I think he was 64 or something.
No, 68.
68, okay.
He, I was kind of blown away at that because I just assumed he was like, closer to Miyazaki, who I think he's getting into his 80s. And so, I just assumed that like, oh, well, Akira Toriyama, it's such you immediately kind of recognize the name if you know anything about, manga or anime. And 68, man, I cannot believe that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, he Dragon Ball was created in the 80s. It went, I believe, 11 years weekly in Shonen Jump, 42 volumes, has sold millions and millions and millions of copies. I do kind of want to get back to what you said about sort of the inspiration for it. So we
will return after these messages.
There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no dead.
Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from the Bigfoot Collectors Club, and you're listening to Tyler and Woody on That Would Be Rad, because that is rad.
He had kind of went on to do, Toriyama had done some other things like, what is it called? Like Mr. Slump or something?
There's Dr. Slump.
Dr. Slump, that's it. Sandland. He did a few things before starting Dragon Ball, but his, and he's admitted this numerous times along the way that it was inspired by this Chinese sort of story, I guess, almost like an urban legend, a folktale, folklore kind of thing. And it was this story called Journey to the West that came out in the 1590s during the Ming Dynasty. And it has been ascribed to a scholar named Wu Chang'en. In the 20th century, that's who we sort of accredit it to, but it's actually not exactly known that it was definitively created by him. So it more than likely it was one of those things that was sort of oral tradition kind of thing, like a long game of telephone sort of deal. But yeah, it oftenly was referred to just as monkey, which that's another thing too, this Monkey King motif. It's pretty popular in anime and more modern like Chinese stuff, Chinese media. But anyway, the title Monkey was used for a popular abridged translation by a guy named Arthur Waley. Waley's translation has also been published as The Adventures of the Monkey God and Monkey, a folk novel of China and the Adventures of Monkey. And yeah, it's kind of a similar thing as Dragon Ball. There's sort of these legends around this Buddhist monk, Xuanzang, and his pilgrimage to India during the Tang Dynasty in order to obtain these Buddhist religious texts called sutras, which, that's sort of the Dragon Balls, if you will. And yeah, there's, this like Dragon Prince, and it's sort of the thing that's really cool about that in Japanese and Chinese, like folk tales, if you will, or the really early kind of ancient folklore from there, it's so cool because it's like, I don't know, I guess growing up here in the West, like our folk tales, you think of, which is still pretty young, considering, but, you think of like Paul Bunyan or like Johnny Appleseed and all that stuff's really cool. But when you find out that a lot of the manga and the anime was inspired by these older accounts, it seems like that stuff was so ahead of its time because it still feels like fresh and again I think there will always be that sort of, just because culturally here in the U.S. we're so different from the East, just the way that we're brought up and the way that our what would you say, like sort of storytelling or narratives, they're just so different. Like everything, it seems so abstract.
It's also like, especially when you're comparing a place like Japan and you're comparing like, let's just say United States in general, the U.S., especially, I don't know, years and years ago, is such a melting pot in comparison to Japan in a way. And obviously I don't mean this like in like any kind of negative way, but they were very isolated on those group of islands. And so your typical sort of rural villager in rural Japan isn't going to be exposed to like the variety of different, because there's something that I was thinking about while you were saying that is like, it's interesting when I start thinking about the folklore that we're more accustomed to growing up, in our age group or whatever, like it is less about, I don't know, I feel like there's just these old ancient spirits and, yokai and demons and not just specific to Japan, but even a lot of that stuff that came to the States from like Ireland, Italy, all that stuff, it kind of just got watered down and forgotten. But that didn't happen in Japan because they weren't facing the same sort of like almost cultural, I don't know what
Marxism.
No, just like that cultural sort of like collision, really. They would just had what they had and have been talking about for centuries and centuries and centuries. And I think that's part of what makes it unique. Like as I'm reading other manga and stories, it's interesting because they're pulling from like these really old ancient ideas, and it's almost like things that would kind of creep us out are more commonplace to them. It's not even a big deal. Like, oh, this kid got hit by a bus. He's in sort of like a limbo scenario, and he's touring around with the Grim Reaper kind of thing. And it's like,
oh yeah,
in a comic book here in America for kids, you'd be like, whoa, that is dark, bro.
It's a little much.
And over there, it's just kind of like, no. I mean, because that's why I think sometimes there's such a huge sort of cultural divide in terms of, I guess, reacting to or trying to interpret the art that they create, because they're pulling from a whole different, older resource pool, that they're kind of just used to. So it's really, really cool and neat. I mean,
well, and I also think there's another weird sort of juxtaposition in the way that, the majority of U.S. adults, we sort of view, I mean, especially growing up in like the 80s and 90s, like, if you were watching cartoons, it was like, oh, cartoons are for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's also that weird juxtaposition where over there, that's not the case. I mean, their biggest movies, I mean, obviously, we have, Disney and Pixar and all that stuff, but over there, like, old school 2D animation is just as much for adults. I mean, like these mangas, like they, if you're in like Tokyo or these like bigger cities, you'll see businessmen on their lunch breaks going and buying basically like comic books, which again, over here, that's sort of frowned upon. It's like, oh, that's like kid stuff. And, I think it's really interesting because they have, like you were saying, they have these like crazy themes that would be looked at as like, whoa, that's pretty dark for kids. But then at the same time, it's like, it's in this very sort of palatable kid looking, format. Yeah.
Now, another thing that I just never really knew, I just assumed, I think like many folks, that with manga, there's only this sort of young teen and maybe preteen sort of focus and everything. But there's literally, and I think that's part of the reason why it's such a culturally, it's a format, it's I guess a medium,
like a type
that
of medium
all ages read, and there are stories and series that are specific for older audiences, whether and different interests and stuff. I mean, there's like more sort of day-to-day, they call it slice of life series, and then there's sports manga. Of course, I've talked about Slam Dunk, which is, if you want to read something that's just amazing and brings you back to the early 90s, late 80s basketball vibes. But then also it's so cool because you get to see this young Japanese artist's perspective about this American sport that he was just obsessed with. And literally he's credited for bringing basketball to Japan, essentially.
Yeah.
Because of his series,
Yeah.
And so it's just a different thing. And I know it's like, for folks that, really just want to hear us talk about Bigfoot and aliens and stuff, I know it may be difficult to, I guess, maybe get excited about Dragon Ball, but, I don't know. I feel like, well, one thing that I found interesting, you go back and you look at some of these Toriyama drawings and stuff, specifically when he depicts, anybody from like India or even maybe even like an African American or something. It is something that the first time you're like, oof. I mean, it's old school.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worried and wondered, there's no way this guy has fans that are black. Dude, I found this incredible article that opened my eyes to it all. Not only does he have an incredibly huge fan base in the African-American community, they're humongous Dragon Ball fans, but I found this like quote that's like, wow, this is amazing. Can I read it?
Yeah, dude.
All right. So this guy says, regarding his depictions of black folks and how he is still able to get so many African Americans like myself to be fans, as much as Toriyama's narratives and characters resonated with black fans, the relationship with the manga creator was complicated by his work's more literal depictions of black people. Toriyama's illustrations are littered with caricatures of our skin tones, noses, lips, and personalities that are so grotesque, potentially, that they simply could not run on American TV, which has steadily phased out, the quote-unquote blackface from early 20th century animated shorts and stuff. He says the character Mr. Popo, which, by the way, If you don't know who that is, it's like, man, I couldn't even believe it when I saw it. It's like, oof. It says, the character Mr. Popo, for example, is a fat, red-lipped assistant, toothless in appearance and personality, who functions as a butler to the Earth's godlike guardian. He says, in fairness to Toriyama, he may have derived parts of Mr. Popo's appearance from the Hindu god Mahakala, who possesses the same traits. But in fairness to me, this guy that's writing this article says, he basically just goes on to say, like, you know, what I just kind of said earlier, which is like, you know, look, he had a very limited exposure to African Americans living in his small town in Japan. So he's simply creating a character that, in his mind, kind of represents, you know, a caricature. What the caricature of that. And he goes on to say, like, the community in general is able to just, like, give the old who cares stamp because of how they resonate with all of the characters and how they resonate with the humor and the adventure and then, for lack of a better term, badassery of the martial arts and cool, you know, stuff. And it's just, it's interesting. I had no idea. I'd always thought about that. And it just, this article popped up and I thought, yes, man, I love stuff that can transcend sort of the typical, you know, sort of snowflake-y, I get offended by everything kind of stuff. Now, there's a difference, you know, especially if you're a new listener. This is not me defending, like, sort of nowadays behavior of just being an offensive asshole. I'm saying sometimes, especially this older stuff, you can see past all that because, especially with somebody that had such a limited, I mean, this series started in the early 80s. Yeah. You know, small town Japan, you know, I don't know. So,
well, I think, you know, like Mr. Popo and even, what's another one? Like Winsor McKay's Jungle Imp, I think that's right. It is interesting because, like what he was saying, where it, you know, especially in 2024, where everybody's offended, there's this huge, like, cancel culture nonsense, and it's like, oh, well, we're gonna, you know, you sort of look in retrospect, look back, and you're like, oh, well, that was blatantly racist. But you also got to think, especially for someone like Toriyama, who, you know, was in Japan, and I mean, even still in 2024. If you're like a black dude and you show up in downtown Tokyo, like, everybody's going to be, like, staring at you because you don't always see that. It's something, it's like, oh, that's a different looking human being, you know? And so I think you do sort of have to look at it through the lens of naivete and, like, and also I think, like, artistically, the, like, manga and anime later are so very like simplified. Like, it's a form or a type of art form that's very, it's sort of like broken down to its most like foundational elements. So, and they did that for the sake of speed because so Toriyama was what they call a mangaka, which is like a total, you know, badass artist that is pumping out, you know, a chapter of a comic per week.
No. Multiple chapters, dude. Sometimes I mean, multiple chapters. That's the crazy part.
But I'm saying, like, his like minimum, like his, like, within that 11 years, you know, from whatever the 80s into, I think, 1995, he never, you know, there was never a week that he didn't put out at least a chapter.
Well, I mean, dude, like, think about
that's crazy.
Achira Oda with One Piece. He's been cranking it out and still going, man. Yeah, every single week.
Yeah, and I mean, I do. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, I do wonder if his, you know, pretty early death had something to do. I mean, they did. You know, they say that he had this is Toriyama, by the way. He died of a subdural hematoma. It's a condition in which the blood collects between the skull and the brain. Yeah. And so I do wonder if, you know, stress and all that stuff kind of can factor into that stuff.
I mean, I I guess, loosely knew about the stress that those guys, especially that work for, like a Shonen Jump, and they're just cranking this stuff out every single week.
It's a young man's game,
dude,
for sure.
It's insane. And what gave me a better picture of it was that series that I read not too long ago called Bakuman. It's by the guys that created Death Note. And they're a team, actually. One's basically the writer and the other one's the illustrator. Sound familiar?
Cool. It does sound familiar, yeah.
You get to see the whole series basically follows these teenage dudes who their dream is to, of course, one day get in Shonen Jump magazine and stuff. And so they do end up doing that. And so you get to follow their weekly, daily sort of stress. And it doesn't really sound that exciting potentially. Like my son, he was just like, yeah, it's pretty cool, but I want to read Naruto, Yeah. He wanted the action. This, to me, was an incredible series because it really does give you a better understanding of just how much they do, man. And, but what's funny, one thing I found out about Toriyama is part of the reason why he illustrated and wrote Dragon Ball, and then over there, that's all it's called. It's just Dragon Ball. But then over here, they split it up into Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. And after that, what I found was apparently because he lost some...
can I say that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite things that I've discovered. And I only did this whenever we were sort of looking more into his past. But there was sort of speculation for a long time. Again, like, I know we've said it before, but Dragon Ball was so massive. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of copies worldwide. We were talking about sort of the Black culture. Dragon Ball, especially, I go to Heroes Con every year up in Charlotte, and, you kind of get a feel for like what people are really into. I would say 90% of Black people that I see are dressed as some character from Dragon Ball.
So awesome.
Which is amazing, yeah. Naruto's probably a close second, but yeah, it's just like a phenomenon. And in '95, when he stopped, it was kind of at its peak. I mean, you think, the phrase like, "Well, quit when you're ahead." I mean, a lot of people were like, "Well, maybe that's it." I mean, a lot of people said, "Well," which I think, I'm sure this contributes to this, but like he just worn out.
Yeah.
It's so much work. But it was a thing where people were wondering like, well, what the heck? Like, why did he just like quit, in the middle? And, also it was sort of like, well, he's done it for 11 years. Stan Lee has said this on certain properties as well. That's like, well, how many stories can you tell with this character?
Yeah.
You sort of feel like you've exhausted, you've told every story that can be told. Which, if we know for guys like Frank Miller with Batman, there's always a way to like flip a character and, that kind of thing. But anyway, he kind of stopped doing it altogether. He stopped doing any kind of manga. I mean, he had said, well, I want to do some stuff that doesn't have that time constraint, it's like sort of more one-off kind of stuff. But apparently later he would say that he quit because he lost his beloved pen holder, or nib holder, as we would say. So it's a little, basically like a piece of wood with a hole in the end that you put your little metal nib at the end. A lot of those guys use like Sailor G-pens, those kind of things. But yeah, he lost this nib holder that he had been using since he was 14 years old. So you think everything, and I do kind of understand this. Like I would say for the last maybe 3 years, I've used this exact same crappy little Pentel brush pen, water brush pen, which is actually made for you to like put water inside and then use it as whatever. But I just use it as like a dip pen. I dip it in ink. And I've tried a million other ones. Even like I've probably bought 30 of the same exact brand, same exact style. And for some reason, it's like this one is just sort of magical. Yeah. So I do get it. And also artists are, we do kind of have like
man.
Well, we're very particular. There's also a bit of sort of superstition or like, well, this is my Excalibur.
Yeah.
You know?
And not to mention, I'm sure his superstitions are steeped heavily in the folklore that we were talking about earlier, I mean, everybody's got that sort of favorite pair of jeans that just fits just right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Shoes, hat, shirt, whatever. Mm-hmm. This is just like, he may have thought, well, I mean, superstition-wise, it's time. And it's interesting because, so in contrast, the guy that, let me say this too. There are other Dragon Ball franchises that have since come out after Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Super is the current one that's like super popular right now and ongoing. There's like a new rehashing that's coming out, I think, relatively soon of Dragon Ball in general. It's just like a new timeline kind of thing. There was Dragon Ball GT. There's all these other properties that he basically either supervised or, helped write but didn't draw again, which is, I mean, it's, you think about it. So you said 11 years, right? 11 years, every single week, almost zero vacations. These folks do not take vacations.
Oh, no vacations.
Ochiro Oda, for One Piece, he's been doing this since, 1999. So it's like...
I felt out like that was 10 years ago.
Yeah, for the past 25 years, every single week, he not only has had to come up with a brand new story, but also draw it. Now, yes, when you get big enough, you can hire assistants and stuff. And it's really neat because, again, going back to Bakuman, they show you that process. But Oda, and I'm pretty confident Toriyama's the same. Their assistants would essentially draw the backgrounds or apply the screen tones, but they would never draw the main characters.
Yeah, and it's kind of a thing, like back in the 60s, Marvel and DC, I'm sure, were doing it, where they would have like finishers, that would come in and do sort of the finished layouts to kind of tighten stuff up. A lot of the times in manga, these mangaka, like they'll have, your more up-and-comers do like backgrounds.
Yeah.
So they'd be doing like buildings and like sort of the
scenery and stuff.
Kind of if you're an artist, it's kind of the boring stuff. Like there's dudes out there that are incredible at that stuff. Daniel Warren Johnson, like, is incredible. He's able to sort of, his backgrounds are always, or not always, but like he'll do this thing on his commissions where it's almost like a fisheye lens type effect, and it's like, how are you doing this?
Yeah.
Because it's like a whole thing, like knowing like perspective. It's like a its own skill within comics or manga or whatever. But I do think it's really cool that Toriyama, this is this same little piece of equipment that he had used for 51 years. And when he lost it over this film adaptation of Sandland. And he just, it's like he just kind of was like, okay, well.
I mean, think about it, man. It'd be really hard not to feel a little, like, nervous if that happened. Like, imagine using the same guitar pick for 50 years and all of a sudden you lose it. I mean, I've been wearing the same necklace for like 30 years.
Oh, yeah, me too.
The second that something happened to it or anything like that, I would be,
Life is over.
Yeah, I can't leave my house. There's a guy camping out in the backyard. He's starting campfires.
Wrap it up. I can die now.
Oh, my goodness. So, anyway, I know, I don't know. It can maybe make it sound a little bit long-winded, but like I said, to us, creativity and being able to create is part of like what just makes us feel level, I guess, and sort of evens me out, dude. If I didn't have a podcast or anything that I was doing right now, I mean, I'd just be going crazy, man.
Oh yeah.
If I don't have an outlet for it, man, I'd just. Phew.
Yeah, you and I are like we've said it before on past podcasts, but we're the kind of guys that like have a really difficult time just sort of like chilling out.
Yeah.
Or like
not making something.
Yeah, like, so for example, and a lot of people don't understand this because they just think like, oh, well, like two friends are getting together, like, especially wives are like, yeah, our husbands are getting together just to chill out and just to like do man stuff. And it's like, not one time, like I kid you not one time, me knowing Woody, my absolute best friend on the planet, we've never just met up and just hung out. It's always been, hey, we're meeting up so that we can like write music, or hey, we're meeting up so we can talk about a game plan on the podcast, or like we can't not create.
But it's funny because like it's, for whatever reason, because I mean, like last week or something, I posted something on the Instagram promoting the episode that came out, and it was so close to the artwork that you had created, and both of us didn't share one with the other. We just kind of like, here it is, right?
Yeah.
And we're both like,
that's cool.
Whoa, holy smokes, man! It's almost the exact same vibe, and it's like, dude, we've been doing this for over 20 years together in some capacity. You know, we kind of were on that same wavelength. And I think like, you know, sometimes, well, I mean, that's not, you know, sometimes we'll get together and go watch a movie or something.
Well, yeah, like movies are different.
I said I thought it was interesting, but you know,
I know what
you're saying. I don't know, and I mean, if anything, if it's one of our kids listening to this show, or if it's one of you listeners, that's just like, you know, like, oh, I don't really know if I want to like create this or learn a new hobby or write this down or whatever.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it, man. I know that there's this like fear of being embarrassed and like, oh, people are going to think. Look, man, something I learned a long time ago, and I feel like it's something that has really helped me tremendously. I wish I would have learned it when I was in dang middle school, is that like all of us human beings on earth, it doesn't matter how successful you are, how famous you are, or whatever, we all have the same insecurities. We all have the same, like, we're just,
not me.
Not me. Funny you should say that. Not me. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't let that be the barrier of entry for you, is what other people are going to think. Who cares? Create it for yourself and or your family, if for no other reason. And, you know, just have fun, man. I don't know. I mean, that's part of the reason, like, if I have free time, I'm, like, writing new stories for the D&D group, or, like, you know, just all kinds of stuff, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually really struggle with this because...
What's that, time management?
Definitely time management. But when it comes to like art or even music, it's, which you and I are, you know, very much alike in this, where it's like, oh no, this thing has to be like perfect. And with the art side, it's definitely even worse, because I'm not like bouncing ideas off of you like it would be when we're writing music. And so, you know, it's like, oh well, every single, you know, like millimeter tick mark has to be like perfectly like flowing in this direction. It's like my stuff takes so long, but I say all that to just say that perfection is the enemy of progress. And so, you know, one thing that I tell my kids, which again, like I'm such a hypocrite when I'm, you know, I'm saying this as a hypocrite, but I always tell my daughter, who Amelia, you know, she'll be drawing something, she'll be like, like, this isn't good, like, you know, whatever. And you know, and I've said this on the podcast too, that like, hey, you know, I have this belief that we all have, like, as far as drawing, it's like we all have a million bad drawings in our body that we have to get out before we get to the good ones. And so it's like, well, that's just a bad drawing. Get that one out. Go to the next.
Well,
go to the next.
Let me add to that. And this is something I tell my kids, because the same kind of deal, like, my youngest will just get so frustrated, and even my oldest too, about a piece of their artwork. And they're just like, no, this is embarrassing. Don't, you know, and I say this, the cool thing about like anything that you do with your hands is that piece of whatever it is. Doesn't matter if there's mistakes. It doesn't matter if there's something that you didn't like about it. 100%, I'm on board with you, Tyler. Yes, you have to kind of get through the 10,000 hours or whatever to make it quote unquote better. But that piece that you just created, there's not another one on the planet like it.
Right.
So you can appreciate that as a young creator. And I tell them, look, okay, I get it. You find mistakes here, but again, this is a unique piece. This is you at this moment, at this time, on this day, you'll never create this again. And no one else will either. So it's like, to me, that is just magic, man. And so like they're like, oh, don't keep this. And I'll literally tape on my wall the ones that they're just like, no, I don't like that. And I'm like, oh, that's my favorite. You know?
Same.
So,
Man, it's so weird that we're talking about this because I literally explained sort of the 10,000 hours principle to Amelia yesterday. You know, she'll often be like, well, God, how are you so good, Dad? And it's like, I think, you know, even outside of her, I think people look at like artists or musicians or whatever, and they think like, oh, well, they were just sort of born with that natural talent. And I think there is some truth to that, but I also think like, yeah, but there's also 10,000 hours that had to, or no, wait, 10,000 or 100,000? I think 100,000.
Yeah, whatever it is. A lot.
Yeah. It's Malcolm Gladwell, but it's 100,000. But it's like, yeah, they may have had talent, so maybe that put them, you know, like a couple thousand hours ahead of the next guy. But it's like, no, it still takes, you know, that much time and dedication to like put into something to be good at it.
And I mean, I know you guys came for Bigfoot, but we're giving you parenting advice. We're giving you motivation right now.
Gold.
Let me give you another little thing. Look, all the things that I've ever done, I had just about every form of genetics fighting against me or whatever. Dude, me being a lead singer is hilarious in like, to me a little bit, because I was terrible, dude. I tried out for a band in high school, and my best friend at the time had to be like, hey, dude, we don't need an extra guitarist, turns out. You know? I punched the bathroom door. But then what did I do? Dude, I spent an entire summer doing nothing but practicing guitar chords, singing, just trying to like match pitch with like Beatles CDs and stuff in my room. I worked my butt off, dude. And then did it. And even then, like, you want to talk about perfection is the killer or whatever. I hated my voice, man, singing. I've always, you know, I would like talk about imposter syndrome. Anytime we'd be sitting around with a bunch of other musicians when we were on tour, and they're like, all right, guys, now you guys just, and I'm just like, I'm just going to go over here. And
go to the bathroom.
Yeah, and pretend like I'm all, you know, whatever. But like, there's that piece. I've done an Ironman triathlon. For those of you that don't know the distances there, that's a 2.4-mile swim followed up by a 112-mile bike ride and then a full 26.2-mile marathon back-to-back on the same day. I was the fat kid in school, dude. I ran cross country because I wanted to spend more time with my brother and see him be amazing. I was not the fast one. I was like, I was determined not to be the slowest one on the team, and I wasn't. By one guy, you know, most of that season. But I was not built. Like, I'm like the, you know, like, I'm the short Italian boxer body style. My brother was like the, you know, well, I guess not really much taller, not taller than me, so short, but slender runner body style. So I had everything sort of going against me. But what I learned through all of those things is, like, if you have a desire, if there's something that you want, all you got to do is work hard, man. And you might not be the number. We didn't hit the Billboard Top 100. We didn't. I wasn't the. I didn't get the first place trophy, or I mean, you know, whatever, at the Boulder Ironman. But I did something that not many people get a chance to do in their life. You know, tour with your best friends.
Yeah, dude.
You know, and then also just be exhausted for an entire day doing what they call an Ironman.
Yeah. And all that to say, rest in peace, Akira Toriyama.
Yeah, man. I mean, this week it felt like we needed a little bit of a just catch-up session with one another and, you know, talk about manga and motivational speaking.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I swear, man, our kids have so many breaks in school.
Yeah.
These days. It's wild. It's like 3 winter breaks.
Yeah.
Fall break. It's nonstop.
Yeah,
and I also got to get out of here because in an hour I have Dunkin' with Dad with my youngest. So we're going to, I guess, play basketball with other dads and eat donuts. And that's pretty exciting.
Yep, and I can't wait to hear about the sports injuries that are going to occur afterwards. Guys, you heard it here first. Next week, Tyler's going to talk to us about how he's wearing a cast.
Yeah, how I broke my hip. Yeah. If you want to find us, head on over to Instagram, drop us a comment, tell us what you like about the show. If you have your own story or topic that you'd like us to cover, or maybe you think that we don't know about, which those are our favorite, shoot us a DM or shoot it to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com. Even better than that, and if you're willing to leave it in your own voice and possibly make it into a future episode, head on over to thatwouldberadpodcast.com. We'd love to have you. Leave a 5-star review. Tell that one weird friend about the show. I'm sure they'll love it too. Buy us a coffee. New merch is coming soon. It's starting to heat up, so we got a lot of cool things on the horizon. Well, I say that, but it's still winter. So
yeah, but we'll design some tank tops and Jordans.
Yeah.
Jordans.
I'm just saying I'm so confused with
it's weird.
Like I feel like we're in summer already. But anyway, yeah, do all those things. The best possible way that you can support the show, and we understand everybody has different financial situations, but is to join our Patreon, the Rabbit Trail. It's a little more of what you love. It's a little looser, a little goosier, and we'd love to have you. We're so grateful for the support that we get over there. It means a lot to us, and it helps this train stay on the tracks. You got anything else, Woody?
Yes, I do. Real quick. I know that's atypical. Usually I don't, but I did want to mention something. 2 things. One, before next week, we had an awesome listener story that we were going to do today, but I want to save it for next week.
Yeah.
So before next week, if you have an experience that you want to tell us about, whether it is some kind of spookiness that happened in your house or in your part of the world, whatever, send it to us any way that you can, whether that's via our email address, which Tyler mentioned, or is in the show notes, or right there on our webpage, or via Instagram. Send it to us because we would love to include it. We've got several that we are going to be talking about next week, but we can always use more, and we love to hear them. Then number 2, I forgot. Hold on.
Oh, boy.
Listener story. You just mentioned something about... No, I don't know. Yep, I guess. I don't remember what the second one was, but I hope everybody has a great week out there.
Awesome. We love you. We appreciate you. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. My favorite song on the radio.
became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is a single rose. That's the way